Welcome to the College of Education.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Shakir, and I am the director of the Candidate Empowerment Center. Today, we are really glad to have Dr. Kristal Clemons here, who is going to be hosting a workshop for us on some instructional knowledge strategies for the professional education subject exam, for the FTCE. And so we have a few of our junior students here, all elementary education majors. Dr. Clemons is a former faculty member at FAMU and currently is a director at the Children's Defense Fund and also works as a faculty person at Virginia State. And so we're really happy to have her here. And I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Clemons.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shakir. Thank you so much, Ms. Bryant, for all your coordinating efforts, and welcome, students. It's my pleasure to be in community with you all this afternoon, and I'm just going to walk you through some strategies so that you can feel prepared and pass the professional. All right, so let's break it down, the format, okay? The professional education subject area test consists of approximately 110 multiple choice questions. Everybody knew that, right? Okay, good. You will have 2.5 hours to complete the test, and each question will contain 4 responses, and you choose the best response. So it's really important as you're preparing for these exams is that you go in knowing exactly the format that you're going to be, that's going to be presented to you, because this way it can save you time, and so you can jump right to the content information that you are being assessed on. All right, so I've got some kind of old data. I need to look up some new data, but from what I could find, 80% of the people who took the test passed on the first time, okay? So that's pretty good. And that should be encouraging to you all as it, pertains to, overall passage rate. So I want to hear from you all. What are some things that you do to feel prepared for the test? And then I'm going to give you some tips. So if anyone can come off mute, just give me some things that you do to begin to feel prepared for the test.
Something I do is
how are you?
I like to read, and then as I'm reading, I take my notes, and I like to write my notes a few different times because I find that writing helps me remember stuff more. So I'll take it in one notebook and then read that over and then read again and take some more notes, or I'll transfer the notes over to another one.
Absolutely wonderful. That's great. Thank you. Repetition with the writing is definitely going to help. Okay, anyone else?
I would say the same for me. Writing helps. When I write it down, I memorize it better. And right now, what I've been studying is one of the books I got from the CEC. That's been helping as well.
Okay, good. Okay. So that's perfect. So some of the things that the research shows and some of the things that I've seen just in my experience working with students. So in order to feel prepared for the test, you can't just wake up and take the test, right? So you need to spend several weeks preparing. So you want to create a schedule for yourself ahead of time, breaking down the topics into different weeks. This way, you have enough time to cover each topic area. Then you specifically want to think through, especially when you're kind of engaging with those practice questions, and we're going to engage with some today. You want to think about the words not or except, right? Which is going to be a marker or indicator that you need to choose from the answers that do not apply. Then you also want to keep an eye on the time, because you do want to make sure that you can complete all of the answers. Some of the challenges that I've seen students have over the years is that they left a lot of questions blank. Either they ran out of time or they were unsure, okay? So you want to be mindful of the 2.5 hour time frame. And then last but not least, and I'm sure you've heard this before, It's better to guess than to leave it unanswered, okay? So think through your best possible answer, but whatever you do, don't leave it unanswered. All right, so these are the types of questions. You're gonna have 3 different types. And as you're studying, it's really good if you could say, oh, this is a direct question. Oh, this is a sentence completion question, or oh, this is a scenario question. It really helps to understand the types of questions that you are reading. So a direct question is asking you to choose the response option that best answers the question. A sentence completion question asks you to select the response option that best completes the sentence. And then last but not least, when you have a scenario question, it's going to ask you to look at a situation, a problem, or a case study, and then you're going to make a diagnosis or recommendation of the best course of action by selecting the best response. So those are those scenarios that your professors have given you throughout your coursework. And you want to take in account all of the knowledge, but also take into account the situation and how you would best answer that question. All right. Any questions so far on just the types of questions, the length of the test, and all of that good stuff before I move on to the competencies? Nope. Okay. So let's break down competencies 1 through 4. Knowledge of instructional design and planning. Let's break that down. What does that mean in your own words? Because
There's different ways to give instruction, like student-centered, teacher-centered, stuff like that.
Okay, good. What else?
Well, I'm assuming it means like what you do before instruction is given, like your planning process, I'm assuming.
Excellent, yes. So I want to blend both answers. So instructional design and planning is really how you craft the lesson plans, right? It's also how you think through the learners in your classroom, and then what's going to happen as you disseminate the content information. Do you need breakout groups? Do you need small groups? Do you need think, pair, share? What do you need? So you're thinking of the instructional design to the lesson and the lesson planning prior to actually even teaching. All right, knowledge of appropriate student-centered learning environments. What does that mean in your own words?
Like the type of learning environment that students will, I guess, benefit the most from, like pertaining to their interests, like cooperative learning. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, cooperative learning is good, right? Or do they need individual? Or do they need small groups? Or do they need to do some pre-writing beforehand, right? We don't know. So those kinds of things. So knowledge of the appropriate student-centered learning environments. Very good. What about knowledge of instructional delivery and facilitation through a comprehensive understanding of the subject matter? Can you break that down in your own words?
Well, just from what I've been studying, I see a lot of questions that are like, I don't know what the question is off the top of my head, but it will result in the teacher having to like revisit or reteach instruction because they realize either the scores are low or something along those lines.
Okay. What else? Anybody else want to add to that? So in addition to what you might have to reteach, it's also thinking through what is the best way to get students to actually master the content. So if we are talking about, let's say, social studies, and we're trying to help students understand geography, do we use maps? Do we use a video, right? Do we send home vocabulary words? Do we have them memorize things? You know, what kind of instructional delivery and facilitation is really going to help provide a comprehensive understanding of, let's say, geography, okay? And you can insert any subject area. You can say fractions, you can say subject and predicate and, you know, verbs and nouns and things of that nature. So it's whatever the content that you're about to deliver or the subject, and you want to think through what is the best way my students will be able to understand this content. Sometimes it's through a song, sometimes it's through rote memorization, right? So we want to make sure that we're clear on that. And then now competency number 4, knowledge of various types of assessment strategies for determining impact on student learning. So what does that mean in your own words?
Being aware of like the different ways that you can give assessments to help the different like learning styles that students have.
Okay, very good. Right, because if you might have students who are very communicative and that can tell you that they understand it, right, through dialogue, through conversation, but you might decide, well, there's some students who are not doing as well in terms of their communication, but I know that they can write or respond to an assessment, right? So thinking about, do you do more formal or informal assessment to determine whether or not they are actually learning the content that you are presenting? All right, so we want to break down some of these competencies. And this is exactly what you all just shared. So when we think about competency 1, there are 10 bullet points underneath competency 1. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but I do think it's important. I used to tell students to have this memorized, but I realized that that's a bit much. But the reason why this helps, it helps when you can memorize the competencies, is because you're easily able to identify the questions as they come up on the test. Okay, so if you know competency 1 has 10 bullet points or 10 components, you want to make sure that you have a clear understanding of knowledge of instructional design and planning. So that's cooperative learning, guided reading, Bloom's taxonomy, right? Things of that nature. So let's look at a sample question from this area. And let me just go into slideshow mode because I don't want you all to see the answer here. All right, so read the question and select the best response. Can I get someone to read the question?
I can read it. What initial action should a teacher take prior to requesting that a student be evaluated for special education services?
All right, read us all the response types.
Sorry. A is conferring with the principal concerning the suspected reasons for the student's low performance, informing the special education teachers that another student will be placed with them, meeting with the parents to discuss alternatives for meeting the student's needs, scheduling a meeting with the school guidance counselor and the parents to design a plan of action.
Okay, so take a minute and think, and then let me know what, or you can actually drop your answers in the chat if you'd like. And then tell me why you selected that answer. Okay, let's see here. Okay, we've got some people say A, conferring with the principal. Other people say D, scheduling a meeting with the school guidance counselor to develop a plan of action. Okay, so for A, who selected A? Tell me why you selected A.
I selected A. I would think that the principal would be who you meet with first, but yeah, I think that's why I selected it.
Okay. All right. Now let's look at before we go on, let's look at the question, right? It's asking what initial action should a teacher take prior to requesting that a student be evaluated for special education? The key phrase here is the prior. Oops, sorry. For those folks who selected D.
I selected D because prior to getting the student requesting that they be requesting that, you would have to inform the parents that you're doing that and let them know to see what they think or what they say. And I think looping in the guidance counselor would help the process and help get the parents information possibly.
Great, great. So you're closer to the correct response. The correct response is actually C. So you want to meet with the parents to discuss alternatives for meeting with the student's needs first, then scheduling a meeting with the school guidance counselor and the parents to decide a plan of action next. Okay, so the wording for some of these questions can be a little tricky, but the hint or the tip would be take prior to requesting. Okay, because remember, we want to make sure that we're keeping families involved and students' needs at the priority or at the center before any kind of individualized education plan or evaluation or things of that nature. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, let's look at the next question. All right, who wants to take this one and read it? And these are all from Competency 1.
I'll read it.
Okay, go ahead.
Which of the following assessment strategies involves a systematic collection of students' work? A, portfolio, B, presentation, C, standardized tests, D, journal entry.
And you can drop them in the chat as people start thinking. I see one answer already. All right. Okay. Folks who selected A is correct. Tell me why you selected A. Why did that make sense to you?
I selected A.
Okay, go ahead.
I selected A because the portfolio would have everything, like all the data needed, like the standardized tests and stuff like that. So that's why I selected it.
That's correct. Excellent. So the key word here was systematic collection. That's the hint that tells you that that would be portfolio. So when you're reading these questions, you got to think through the key words. You got to think through what exactly is the question asking me, okay? Very good. All right, next, let's go to the next slide. Or actually the next slide, I only did 2 sample questions per thing. So now we'll go on to Competency 2. All right, so
Can you
now,
go back to the first question really quick? I just want to take a picture.
oh, sure, of course.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so Competency 2, knowledge of appropriate student-centered learning environments. So take a moment to read these 8 points here and think through in your mind some examples that you've seen either in your own instruction or even through your professor's instruction. And I'll read through just a few of them, right? So select and use appropriate techniques for organizing, allocating, and managing the resources of time, space, and attention. Using effective techniques for communicating high expectations to students. Determining the skills and practices that encourage innovation and foster a safe climate of openness, inquiry, and equity to support for all students. And then identify assistive technologies that enable all students to effectively communicate and achieve their educational goals. So this gives you an overall sense of what Competency 2 is talking about. So now let's try these sample questions. Can I get somebody else to read it for me?
Which of the following situations is the best example of a teacher promoting a climate of openness, respect, and inquiry in the classroom? A, creating interest centers and interest groups in the classroom. B, establishing a variety of levels of instruction in the learning environment. C, developing curriculum that is consistent with student interest. D, promoting student cultures that are studied, shared, and celebrated.
So you can drop your answers in the chat, take a moment to think. And remember, the best example, right? So that's the wording that we're talking about when we think about these could all be examples, but you have to think through what would be the best example that's going to get at promoting a climate of openness, respect, and inquiry. All right. Great job. Excellent. You guys got it. You all got it. So promoting student cultures that are studied, shared, and celebrated. Yes. And the other ones can work, right? But they don't meet kind of the wholeness of a climate of openness, respect, and inquiry, right? Creating interest centers and interest groups in the classroom, establishing a variety of levels of instruction in the learning environment, developing curriculum that is consistent with students' interests. Those are all good things to do, but when you think about the best example of promoting a climate of openness, respect, and inquiry, it's really D that gets at all of that. And so as you can see with any standardized test, there it's written in a way to be a little tricky and to help you kind of, challenge yourself in terms of thinking through the best example. All right, next one. Who wants to read that one?
A statement conveying a student's present academic and functional level should be placed with the student's technological needs in A or N, and then weekly report to the parent, quarterly report home, individual educational plan, or permanent file folder.
Let us know what you think. Drop your answers in the chat. Statement conveying a student's present academic and functional levels. So the hint here is a statement. All right. So some people got A, some people thought C, or one person thought C and another person thought D. Okay, so the correct answer is individual education plan. So a statement conveying students' present academic and functional levels should be placed with the student's technological needs, not necessarily in a report to the parent. That communication should be ongoing. The quarterly report home, that's a little bit too late because you need real-time information. Permanent file folder, that's kind of a trick answer. It's connected to the individualized education plan, which then is connected to the student's permanent file folder. But you always want to document everything that you're doing in the individualized education plan. You also want to make sure that you have any assessments, anytime you've met with the students, anytime you met with the families, and all of the needs. Because in many cases, that IEP is like that legal document so that teachers and schools work with families to make sure that the students have what they need to succeed. Does that make sense to everybody?
I have a question about this one.
Sure.
So with C, I noticed in like the question, it didn't really specify if it was a student with like a disability or anything. So how would we know? Because I was thinking C, but I was like, I'm not sure because it didn't really let me know in the
Right.
question.
No, that's a great question. So whether a disability is acknowledged or not, you still want to have the present academic and functional levels of the student, like where they are with their work, where they are with their assessments, where they are with their understanding. Because sometimes as the individualized education plan is being developed, some of the assessment material may not be readily available, right? So we may not know if and what type of disability a student may have. at that particular time.
Okay,
So
thank
I
you.
have a question.
Sure.
So you said that the statement should be there for the student, even if we don't know if they have a disability. But if we don't know if they have a disability, how would we be able to place that in an individualized education plan? Because in order to have an IEP, don't you need to have a disability on file with the school?
Right. And a lot of times that assessment is forthcoming, right? So when you're working with students, working with parents and things of that nature, it's all happening in rapid time. And so that statement conveying the student's present academic and function levels is what should be a component of that individualized education plan.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Because also too, you want to, you won't be tested on this, but just tangentially, just for general knowledge, you want to be able to document where your students are over time, right? So if at the beginning of the school year, this is what the statement says, but then at the end, you never know, the academic and functional levels may increase, they may, they could change. And so it's really important that we just have those statements, those clear documents, so that we can track students' progress over time. All right, great work, great work. So now let's talk through competency 3, knowledge of instructional delivery and facilitation through comprehensive understanding of subject matter. So just take a moment, familiarize yourself with these 10 areas. This actually accounts for 18% of the test. So this section is going to test your knowledge on delivery and facilitating instruction. It's including, for example, a community-centered teaching approach. It's communicating a learner-centered classroom. And it's also including feedback techniques. So these are all things to think about. All right. So I'll read this one because you all have been very good at reading them. At the beginning of a unit, a teacher gives a vocabulary quiz on major terms and concepts of the new unit. Such a formative assessment can identify students who, A, have prior knowledge to the subject matter, should receive higher scores, are not interested in the topic, or have the ability to learn the subject matter. All right, let me start thinking through your answers. Very good. Yes. This formative assessment will help you identify students who have prior knowledge of the subject matter. Now, what do you do with that prior knowledge? Anyone?
Wait, what was your question? I'm sorry.
So the answer is have prior knowledge of the subject matter, right? So if you give the vocabulary quiz and this type of formative assessment, you're going to be able to understand students' prior knowledge of the subject matter. When you have that students' prior knowledge of the subject matter, what does that then give you the ability to do?
I guess that lets you know what to focus on in your instruction.
Absolutely. Excellent. How to build it out. Because if the students already have a major understanding of, I don't know, one content area or one topic area, it's no need to build out your lesson to focus on that. You need to go through and focus on some of the gaps where the students might not have as deep knowledge. All right, let me have someone read the next question. Erica, Sydney, Eva.
When a teacher asks students to make judgments based on certain criteria, the teacher is developing A, inquiry-based learning skills, B, conflict resolution skills, C, writing skills, and D, higher order thinking skills.
Great. All right, think through. Drop your answers in the chat. When a teacher asks a student to make judgments based on certain criteria, The teacher is developing what? Excellent. Yes, those higher order thinking skills. Why are higher order thinking skills so important?
Kind of just get students to kind of think farther, like on a deeper level, more than just like a simple question, like a convergent question with a one answer.
Exactly. Yeah. It's moving beyond the yes or no to actually helping develop, right, a full thought pattern, right, around the various subject matter. So very good.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
For it to be inquiry on the last one, what would it have said?
Oh, for what would it needed to say for inquiry-based learning?
Yes.
So inquiry-based learning is more about problem posing, right? So you're thinking, so the question was, let me go back to the question. The question was to make a judgment based on certain criteria, right? If you're thinking about inquiry-based learning, you're really doing more probing, right? You're thinking about all the different scenarios. You're thinking about the various questions that might need to be answered in order to come up with an answer, a statement or an answer or development with that area. So when you think inquiry-based, you're thinking problem of practice. You're thinking questions. You want students to really explore. When you're asking students to make judgments based on a certain criteria, is you have a lot of information that you're presenting to the students or to the scholars, and then they kind of have to think through what would be the next steps. So one deals more with questioning, and then one thing deals more in terms of higher order thinking, really thinking through kind of the next steps, what could be various dispositions based on the information that's presented.
Okay, thank you.
Good. All right, competency 4. So knowledge of various types of assessment strategies for determining the impact on student learning. So with this, this actually makes up 14% of the test. So you're going to see the types of questions in this section. You're going to see formative versus summative assessments. You're going to see norm versus criterion reference assessment. And then you're also going to see like diagnostic assessments. So you know how usually at the beginning of a lesson or even a beginning of the school year, you might do a pre and a post, right? That kind of thing. So really understanding where the students are, your instructional methods, and then where you hope the students will be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, great. So now let's look at a type of a sample question. Can I get someone to read that question for me?
Which accommodation for taking a multiple choice test would best serve a mid-level ELL student? Giving the student a translation of the test, allowing the student extra time to complete the test, permitting the student to work with another student, or having the student answer the questions orally. D. I'm trying. So I'm just going to say my answer out loud. I think it's D.
Okay. I can see why you all would pick D, right? Having the student answer the test questions orally, right? But the hint or the tip here would be mid-level ELL. So having the students, oh, somebody put B. That's the correct answer, is allowing the student extra time to complete the test. So if we're thinking about a beginning level ELL student, maybe someone who has not much fluency in the English or may not be a strong reader, then having the student answer the test questions orally would be perfectly fine. But when we're thinking through a mid-level ELL student, we're thinking about someone who does have some sort of baseline knowledge, who with the having the allowed extra time, they could complete the test in a favorable fashion. So that goes back to what we talked about earlier. When you think about some of these questions, you want to think through what they're asking us. So we're not generalizing all ELL students here. We're thinking about what would best serve the mid-level ELL. Is that helpful in terms of understanding why B would be the better answer?
Yes, I realized after that I said that B was the better answer.
Okay, no, it's all good. And see, I'm throwing in kind of the hardest questions just because when you study with the hardest questions, when you see the actual test on the assessment or the on the professional when you take it, it is kind of like a reprieve. Like, okay, I've been studying some really challenging questions here. And then I also want you to be cognizant too of the wording of the questions, because you have to understand what the question is asking you to explain or asking you to do. All right, let's look at this one and then we're moving right along. Okay, who wants to read this one?
Kamaria, what about you? You haven't read any, I don't think.
Is someone else on here? I didn't. Oh yeah, hey Kamaria.
Yeah, Kamaria joined us.
Welcome, Kamaria. Would love to hear from you.
A student appears to be, well, I asked a question earlier. I've been here participating.
Yes, okay.
A student appears to be struggling with a reading subskill after initial instruction. The teacher wants to find out what component of reading is hindering comprehension. Which of the following assessments would best aid the teacher? Choose an answer. A, screening. B, diagnostic. C, progress monitoring. D, outcome measure.
All right. Good. I see the answers coming in. Very good. B is your correct answer. Good job, everyone. And so what this is, the hint for this, it says when the student appears to be struggling, right? So we're understanding that there's obviously something that we need to get a handle on, right? We need to understand or diagnose the problem, therefore a diagnostic. So the teacher wants to find out what component of reading is hindering the comprehension. So we have to do a diagnostic assessment. So is it the phonemic awareness? Is it the blending? What's going on that is hindering the comprehension for the student? All right, moving right along. These are the last competencies of the professional. So key competencies 5 through 8, and we'll go through them now. Knowledge of relevant continuous professional improvement, knowledge of the principles of professional conduct of the education profession in Florida, knowledge of the research-based practices appropriate for teaching English language learners, and knowledge of effective literacy strategies that can be applied across curriculum to impact student learning. So this takes you, it's pretty broad. So it's taking you on what you need as a professional, but it's also taking you on what you need as a person who is instructing students, particularly as it pertains to English language learners or even effective literacy strategies. All right, and then here is the breakdown for this competency 5. So when you think about yourself as a professional, as teachers, we're always engaged in continuous improvement or continuous professional improvement. You sitting in on this workshop right now is an example of relevant continuous professional improvement, okay? So you wanna think through your goals, right? You also wanna think through analyze and apply data-informed research to improve instruction and student achievement. And something as simple as attendance data, right? When you want to think about who's coming to class, who's not, who's late, who's not, and how is that impacting student achievement. You want to think through professional growth opportunities, right, for yourself in terms of reflective practices to improve your performance and impact student learning. So what kind of workshops are you needing to take? What kind of professional development are you needing to experience in order to enhance instruction and student learning? Does anyone want to give an example of the types before we jump into the sample question? Do you want to give an example of the types of professional development that you've participated in that have impacted your instruction?
I
I
would say,
remember when I was getting ready to work at a summer camp, they brought in, and it was an education-based summer camp, so they brought in someone to do a bunch of different icebreakers with us that we could use for the kids that would promote like a communal environment where everybody would feel safe and we'd be able to start the day, different things, so that way the students would be able to move around and take breaks in case anything was too much. So different things like that, how to interact with your supervisors and peers and colleagues.
Excellent. Yep. Fantastic. Anybody else?
I can share. Well, this past summer I worked with FAMU DRS and we had a whole training that kind of prepared us for what the actual summer was going to look like. So, and even just having like that one opportunity to present a lesson plan was kind of helpful because you know what you'll be doing when you get in the classroom.
Perfect. Perfect. Anybody else?
I was gonna say like even these workshops, like they're definitely helpful with professional development.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think the workshops help too. I've learned over the years when you do these kind of refresher courses and workshops, it builds students and professionals' confidence. They go in, they know, and passage rates go up. So great. All right. I know we're running short on time, so I do want to get through a few more sample questions if that's okay with everybody. All right. So let's look at this one. After attending a reading workshop, a teacher realizes that the current reading strategies are not improving student academic achievement. The most appropriate next step is to, and really we want to think about the most appropriate. So all of these are good next steps, just to be clear. But what would be the most appropriate? Align classroom activities with school improvement plan, ask a grade level team member for help, correlate reading strategies with the district curriculum checklist, or request assistance from a reading coach. All right. Okay, one more opportunity. And the correct answer is yes, meet with that reading coach. D and B are a little bit confusing, right? So you're asking a grade level team member for help, but the main goal is to request assistance from any reading coach, right? Because we're specifically looking at after attending that reading workshop, okay? I could see why people would pick B, but the correct answer is request assistance from the reading coach. Now, some schools, unfortunately, especially now that what we're dealing with post-COVID, that position may not be filled at that school, right? Then we can ask grade level team members for help. But in terms of, the way this FTCE is written, it's written in the, best case scenario. It's not taking account of COVID. It's thinking about just what it would be like on a normal day. All right, can I get someone to read this question?
Teacher would like to encourage parents and guardians to be involved in their students' education. Which of the following strategies is the best way for the teacher to encourage diverse parents and guardians to come to the classroom for a cultural activity? A, writing an article for the school newsletter asking parents and guardians to drop in at their convenience to discuss ideas on cultural activity. Displaying posters inviting parents and guardians to meet with the teacher after school to plan a cultural activity for the class. Having students write a personal invitation inviting parents and guardians to attend a cultural activity during school. Asking the principal to develop a school-wide cultural activity to be held in the evening for students and their parents and guardians.
Let's see what you got in the chat. What are you all thinking? Okay, very good, very good. Yes, so this is tricky too, right? So the correct answer is C, but I've seen many students respond to this with asking the principal to develop. But the hint here would be a teacher would like to encourage parents. Which of the following strategies is the best way, right, to encourage diverse parents? And so when it comes from within, particularly from the students writing personal invitations, inviting parents and guardians to attend the activity, um, it's that family engagement that will go a long way. So the correct answer is C. All right, competency 6. So competency 6 is really thinking through how we think through how we conduct ourselves as professionals in the field, right? So you want to make sure you know your professional principles of professional conduct. You want to make sure that you identify the statutory grounds and procedures for any disciplinary action. You understand the rules and regulations, right? Code of conduct, things of that nature. You want to make sure that you understand the rights and legal responsibilities and procedures for reporting any incidences of abuse, neglect, or signs of distress. You want to also understand safe, appropriate, and ethical uses of technology. And then finally, determine and apply the appropriate use of maintenance of schools' information and records. So this is all procedural. This is all about protocols and making sure you know what to do as an educator, a licensed educator. All right. Who wants to read this? And remember, Florida is mandate reporting. So the trick here would be the teacher is required by law to.
I'll read it.
Thank you.
When a student with a large bruise on her face is questioned by the teacher, the student says that they fall at home while playing. Having previously noticed bruises on the student, the teacher suspects that the child is being abused. The teacher is required by law to contact the A, abuse hotline, B, guidance counselor, C, administration, and D, social worker. I'm going to pick A.
That is correct. And why is it A? What tells you that it's A?
Okay, so actually I had a previous workshop on this, and then they told me that it was A, and like they walked us through as to why it was A. So that's why I remember that.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. And it also takes you as the teacher, right? It gives you the opportunity to report the information. And then when you do that, the appropriate parties will then begin the investigation, right? We know these situations are not going to be resolved overnight. And so you document what you saw, and that's it. You document what if the student said anything, and that's it. And then from there, the appropriate professionals will then get involved. So you then from there, you will eventually learn that the guidance counselors, school administrators, and social workers are involved. But the first step is to report it so that the appropriate investigation can take place. So good job. Next question. Someone want to read that one for me?
When parents request copies of software to use at home with their children, a teacher should consult acceptable use policy, school technology plan, site license guidelines, or software use procedures.
You all are ready. I see the answers coming in the chat. You all are ready to go. I love it. So the correct answer is actually C. You want to make sure the site license guidelines allows you to even have a copy of the software. Most of these licensing agreements require that it be used on a school device in the school setting, right? On the school's IP address. And so a lot of times we're not able to give parents copies of the software, especially as things are changing. That's why, especially during COVID, where you saw all of that, I had to, people were scrambling to get devices to children because they had to have the appropriate devices with the appropriate technology so that they can then do, virtual work at home. So always follow the site license guidelines, because sometimes they may only pay for a certain number of devices to have the actual material or the content. All right, competency 7. So competency 7 is focusing on understanding research-based practices appropriate for teaching English language learners, okay? And we'll go through this. Understanding the nature and role of culture, cultural groups, and individual cultural identities into the learning experience for all students. You also want to have a good understanding of the first and second language literacy acquisition and the various stages. We also want to think through our standards-based curriculum and how culturally responsive or multicultural it is. And then thinking through what would be the appropriate accommodations for the various English language learners' English proficiency level. Okay, can I have someone read this question?
Which of the following teaching strategies would best show sensitivity to English language learners' challenges? A, displaying the students' uncorrected English work in the classroom. That is so wrong. Grouping students by their English knowledge and experience, encouraging safe times to use academic English in class, assigning students whose first language is English to tutor classmates.
I love what you said with letter A. You said, oh, that is so wrong. So you already know that that is inappropriate, right? We don't want to do that to the student. So drop your answers in the chat. Tell me what you're thinking. And students, and remember, this is which of the following teaching strategies would best show sensitivity. So this is the language that you're looking for. When you're reading this question, what would make you as an educator sensitive to the English language learners' challenges? Not necessarily what's the best strategy to teach them, but what would show your sensitivity? Yes, very good. So C is encouraging safe times to use academic English in class, right? Very, very good. Does that make sense to everybody in terms of understanding one's sensitivity to an English language learner's challenges? Okay.
Yes.
All right, great. I see head nods. All right, we'll use this as the last question, and then I'm just going to jump through some strategies.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat what you were saying about why the answer was the answer for the previous question? My internet went out a little bit.
Oh, that's okay. So the trick here is which strategies would best show sensitivity. So, for example, grouping students by their English knowledge and experience, that might provide some strategies to help them learn, that might help them feel comfortable. You might get a tutor that can help them as well. But in terms of showing sensitivity to the English language learners' language challenges is when you encourage safe times to use academic English in class, meaning you're not overcorrecting them, you're giving them an opportunity to get the information out. If they say something that it's not 100% correct, it's a safe space for them to communicate with you so that you can give them the feedback that they need. One of the things we never want to do is display students' uncorrected English work, because we want to make sure that first of all, we want to create affirming learning environments. The second of all, we want to make sure that the students, when they have their work, that it's the correct work. Should they take that work home? Should they reflect on it again? We don't want them to memorize answers or look at answers that are not accurate. All right, so this will be our last question, and then I'm just going to jump through some other strategies. Because then who wants to read the last one?
You can read it. A class has students from various cultural backgrounds. The teacher notices that students of like cultures are exhibiting similar skills and knowledge that differ from students of other cultures. This could be due to the impact of cultural knowledge on language, habits, transfer, interactions.
All right, what are we thinking? Drop your answers in the chat. Very good. Excellent. Great. So the answer is transfer. And so ELL children may manifest what we call interference or transfer from their first language, right, to their second language, English. And this means that a child may take an English error due to the direct influence on their first language structure. So, for example, like in Spanish, we might say, Esta casa es más grande, right? My house is bigger. However, the literal translation of that is my house is more bigger because you have the más grande, right? So a Spanish speaking child would say the house is more bigger versus saying the house is bigger. So we have to keep in mind some of those transfer or interference, right? And so this is just a normal phenomenon, right? Of as we're learning different languages, it does not indicate any kind of language disorder. Does that make sense to everybody? So we just don't want to assume just because it's not a direct translation to English that they have any kind of disorder or disability. It's simply just kind of how things transfer from one language to the next. All right, so I'm going to jump down to some of the following tips for success because I know that you all have to log off soon. So one of the things I want you all to think about as you are going through these competencies, think back on your coursework, right? So which courses connected to which competency and which assignments helped you unpack each competency. And so this is just a hyperlink to your course calendar or your course, your degree audit. And then you also want to take this seriously and invest in yourself, right? So what you did today by showing up, reading through these questions, going back and forth with one another, just really taking that time to invest in yourself so that you can break down what the questions are really asking you. And then do not cram, everybody. So I know people are taking the test at the end of the month. That means you need to chunk and pace yourself. So that means every day you need to identify your tasks for the day. You want to set your timer, how long you're spending on these questions. You also want to think through what you're doing for that duration. No one can study for 2-3 hours at a time. I don't care what anybody says. All the brain research, all the research out there talks about chunking and really taking the subject area or the content in small chunks and then taking breaks in between. Is that a strategy that you all implement, or do most of you all just say, to heck with it, I'm going 3 hours. I got to get this knowledge.
I find myself, I can't really sit for that long to study something. Normally, I just kind of set an hour aside, or like on the weekends, if I know I'm being lazy or something, I'll be like, okay, I know that book's over there and I'll go grab it. But yeah, I can't do 3 hours. I just will lose my focus and my attention span will just be gone.
Okay, good. Yeah, you want to do it 25, 30 minutes at a time, and you want to take some mini breaks in between.